We begin this show with a man in Tampa who is trying to get his wife to return to the United States after she and dozens of other Cubans were deported. Cuban mother Heidi Sanchez Tejeda of Tampa was in the process of getting a green card. She was separated from her one-year-old daughter last week in court during a check-in with ICE, leaving behind her husband and several children. All are U.S. citizens living in Florida. From Havana, she described the chaotic scene in the Tampa courtroom. She said officials told her the daughter, still nursing, had to stay. They told her to call her husband, Carlos Valle, a naturalized U.S. citizen, to let him know what was happening.
Then I started crying. I begged, I pleaded. My daughter got nervous and agitated and began to ask for milk. And I told them, look, she's asking me to breastfeed her. She still breastfeeds, but it didn't matter to them.
Supporters marched in downtown Tampa asking for her return. Targeted large-scale operations have been touted by ICE, posting nearly 800 arrests in the last week.
When you enter the country illegally, and you know you're here illegally, and you choose to have your citizen child, that's on you. That's not on this administration.
The operation is a multi-county collaboration on immigration enforcement between the Trump administration and public safety agencies in Florida, a state where 1/5 of the population is foreign-born. Shelley, I'd like to start with you. This story really puts a face on the different kinds of people who are being deported. Your reaction to this story?
Well, what we see is the cruelty is the point. This is essentially an advertising campaign to immigrants to get them to self-deport. They want to scare people into leaving the country. But I think what's most important to recognize is that just today, or perhaps yesterday afternoon, the U.S. Congress House Judiciary Committee voted down an amendment proposed by Democrats to prevent the government from using United States funds to deport United States citizens to foreign prisons, gulags, concentration camps. That was voted down by the Republicans on the House Judiciary Committee. So now we are in uncharted waters as far as what this government, this administration wants to do. These are people who, if they were convicted of crimes, they were convicted of crimes against the United States, and they should be punished according to United States values. And instead, they are going to be renditioned off to foreign gulags and potentially concentration camps and prisons where we have no control over what happens to them. I think that's a travesty, and it is putting us further and further down the road toward fascism.
In the case of this woman, she was deported back to Cuba. She is in a home with family and friends. She is not in a detention center. Akash, it does bring up the point of, for those who are looking at these deportations, even if you are for legal immigration and the deportation of illegal aliens involved in criminal activity in this country, this is a story that could be potentially damaging to the Republican Party. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, it's a tough situation, but I mean, this unfortunately, this lady was undocumented, and ICE was following the law, and Florida's job is to work with ICE and cooperate, and that's what we did here. And you definitely feel for her, but you know that she wasn't documented.
Mike, how can this backfire? How can this develop further and really polarize folks even more?
That's a great question. I am looking for signs that it's going to put a dent in Trump's poll ratings. The tariff, the economy, he's taken hits there. The border, that's where he's rated the highest. So you have 230 law enforcement agencies cooperating in the state of Florida with ICE. That's the most out of any state. There's just a across-the-board enthusiasm for the supporters of Trump behind this policy. Despite stories like this that are heartbreaking, I don't see a lot of steam being lost as far as the push for ICE enforcement.
William, as a longtime political reporter, how do you see this playing out?
Well, the interesting thing to me about this is that for many years, Hispanics have tended to lean Democratic, not always in Florida because of the influence of conservative Cubans in South Florida. But Donald Trump has reversed that, and now I'm wondering if stories like this one are going to reverse it again. as Mike said, and I think there have already been some indications in polling of Trump losing a little ground among Hispanics. That's a question to watch that hasn't really been settled. But I have a lot of other questions about this. Well, first, we've received very little information about who these people were that were arrested, taken in. What did they do?
The 800 that were last week.
How many more stories like Haide Tejeda are there? We've heard a few of these. The famous one, Kilmar Albrega Garcia from Maryland, who was deported by mistake and is now in a hellhole prison in El Salvador. How many more of these stories are there? The other question I'd have, frankly, is could somebody please tell me what harm this woman was doing?
Right.
She was caring for the elderly.
Right.
She has a 1-year-old daughter. I mean, she's a poster child for what not to do as far as this policy goes.
And we obviously spent hundreds of thousands of tax dollars on this operation. What good did the citizens of Florida get for that money?
There's also other things to be concerned about with this kind of a policy, like public safety. In Orlando, for example, they passed in 2018 the Trust Act, which basically told first responders not to ask a person's citizenship status when they were called to either the scene of a crime or an accident or something that required some first responder to show up, because they were afraid that people would not report crimes or call for emergency assistance. Now, the Florida Attorney General, Uthmeier, has sent a letter threatening the mayor of Orlando that if he continued to follow that policy, that he would be subject to legal sanctions, potentially even removal, like they did to Andrew Warren. So far, it seems like Buddy Dyer, the mayor of Orlando, is standing pat on that because of the safety. He's concerned about the safety of his community.
And the safety of the community, the fact is there are many people who do support the deportation of illegal aliens because they are pointing to different cases where there have been crimes committed by folks who are in this country illegally. And so they are asking for legal immigration. Akash, you know, that's an important point that people are discussing.
Yeah, and to Mike's point about the polling, President Trump campaigned on this issue, and the voters elected him, and Republicans wanted the border security tightened, and gave ample time to folks that were undocumented to figure things out. So I don't think it's going to hurt his polls for this specific issue. I do feel for this lady. I think everyone does, but at the same time, the law is law.
I think we need to be careful about calling people illegal aliens. I don't know what crime she committed. What's illegal about?
She was undocumented.
Yeah, she was undocumented,
right,
correct.
Right.
But she wasn't illegal.
Well, she came to the country without, she was in the country without a legal status, a legal immigration status.
Well, I believe that under former policy of the government, she was welcomed here.
She was admitted and she was going through the process, so she was waiting to hear back as to what her status was.
So she wasn't illegal, she was just undocumented.
Right. She was allowed.
Right, allowed.
Allowed until
they could figure out what her status was.
Until she wasn't allowed.
She didn't commit a crime, is my point. So we need to be, careful when we call people illegal aliens. There's nothing, illegal in the process that she was going through.